Welcome to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we are here on a monumental afternoon as we have reached our 50th podcast. I'm sitting here in the studio with a very special guest that we will get to in just one second, but I am sitting here in the Nasir Harris Podcast Studio with Nightly News President Brian Christiana. Brian, welcome to this monumentous occasion.
Thank you again for having me.
And we're also sitting here with Michael Ademola. Michael, welcome to the podcast today.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I am wonderful. So one of the things that we wanted to try to do for our 50th episode, and I hope that we can continue doing this on other future big numbered episodes, maybe 100 is our next one. That's a while away, but we really wanted to have somebody special in. We've been doing the podcast certainly down here at the studio in the Boyer House for about a year now. We started, in the spring term of 2017, but we've been working on the Nightly News Podcast for going on 2 years now, and I think that this is a very special occasion. So we obviously wanted to have somebody in that could represent the magnitude with which our episode is, and of course, that is our Provost and Interim Co-President, Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams. Dr. Fedrizzi-Williams, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored. That's a big lead up, so now I feel like I have to be extra impressive.
Well,
that I am your 50th anniversary guest.
Well,
so thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. We really wanted to do something special, and obviously we had been talking back and forth. It's been almost a year since you were on last time,
wow.
And I ran into Heather in the hallway, and she said, "Hey, when are you going to have us back? We want to come back." So it made perfect sense. So. Obviously, since we've last met, we've had a lot of things going on. And obviously, right off the top, I mentioned that you were the provost and the co-interim president.
Right.
And we can talk about that in a little bit.
Sure.
I think that you've been pretty open and honest with the transition here. And we certainly appreciate that we have such wonderful leadership. But I wanted to talk to you about a few other things that are going on, and then we can address those later. And the gentleman will join us in our second segment to do a student Q&A. We actually, during the last Nightly News meeting, we sat down and we were brainstorming some of the questions that we were going to ask you, so they're going to run with the second segment.
Very good. I'm excited.
Well, the first thing that we would like to talk about is, since it's been nearly a year since we've had you down, obviously many big things have happened here at the school, and many of which that you were, a spearhead of, or certainly, maybe some of them were your ideas, some of them maybe you were implementing. Can we talk about what some of those initiatives have been since you've, become provost?
So there's been a lot happening, and obviously with any transition, one of the things we have to do is identify, okay, where is our college going? So I would say the first thing that we're working on in the last few months, I've been working pretty closely with the board of directors and just identifying some concrete areas for us to be focusing on, where we see our institution going, how do we provide the best degree for our students so that when they leave here, they're able to find jobs. So those are some of the behind the scenes things that we're working on now. But in terms of the provost role, I could tell you one of the biggest things that I noticed when I came here is that we needed additional support, and support for students and support for faculty. And so probably the two biggest things I did since arriving, one was expanding the Writing Center to the Learning Center. And I think we just started that process. So yes, we expanded it from a writing center to a learning center where there's tutors in multiple subjects. There's peer tutors. We recently added a testing center for students as well if they need to take a test in a separate environment. So we just started the programming there. I think that's something big that we're going to continue. And then faculty resources, that's another area I'm passionate about. We have a Center for Teaching Excellence now. When we first got here, it was a faculty support center. So we are adding in tools for faculty. So some of the things we did, we wrote an advising handbook. We wrote an assessment handbook. We're in the process of one of our current initiatives is a program chair's handbook. Because often when you get in these roles in higher ed, most people are like you and I. They worked in their industry for a little while. They studied a field. They come in and suddenly they're professors. And then if you're a great professor, sometimes we say, hey, you'd be a great program chair. And we put someone in that position and we don't have a lot of support for them other than the one-on-one or when something comes up and it's reactionary. We say, okay, this is how you handle that. the deans and I have decided we need something that's a resource, and we need an onboarding process. So another initiative this term, we're creating a new faculty orientation. So when a new faculty member comes, they're not thrown into deep water and say, okay, go to the classroom and teach and let us know how that goes.
I've been here for 5 years. Now, I've been here 2 years full-time. And when I was brought on as an adjunct, and this, of course, is certainly no disrespect, I'd never taught a college class before.
Yeah, which is often the case.
And it was, here's the copy of the textbook. I'll need a copy of your syllabus.
Yeah, I had the same experience.
And I'm just thinking, wow. You have a lot of faith in me that I'm going to be able to pull this off. Now, fortunately, I was very lucky that one of my colleagues actually was the one that helped me get in and was very, very willing to help. And that was one of the things I can say about our faculty here ever since I've been here. People are very, very helpful when somebody new comes in
No doubt about it.
We understand the challenges, even if it's just with the LMS, which would be our learning management system. So in our case, Blackboard. Blackboard is extremely complicated. And if you don't know what you're doing, for example, at another institution I taught at, we use D2L, which is totally different than Blackboard. So even if you do have experience with another LMS, you still don't understand how the functionality of Blackboard is. So I think that's helpful. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is the Center for Teaching Excellence. Mike, I know you at least, in our Writing for Broadcast Media class, got to go into the Center for Teaching Excellence and when we did our news program. What was your opinion about some of the new technology that you saw in the Center for Teaching Excellence?
I thought that some of the new technology was surprising because, one, I was happy that we had it, and two, I was happy that it was being utilized properly. I thought it was a great opportunity for students to see, so that students can see that there is something that the college can offer besides just the typical core curriculum, so that students can grow and develop the skills needed when they exit the school and enter the job field.
And I think you guys did a really wonderful job. You got to use the green screen. We got to use the teleprompter. It was a lot of fun. So I really think that that's two initiatives right off the top that we can obviously almost immediate results from.
Right. And I could tell you two other things we're working on, students especially, since I have two of you here. Two big things this term that we are really looking at examining are, one, the current college schedule, your course schedule. And so one thing I want you to be able to see all your courses that are offered in the next year so that you can really plan out what you want to take every term you want to take it. And the other thing is getting more creative with how we're offering courses. So offering more flexible scheduling. We have blended courses at night. There's no reason we can't have blended during the day, so that instead of having to go 4 days in a row, you go 2 days and then you have an online hour component. So I think the schedule is a big thing. And then the other thing is examining our current food services as well and looking at how we can work with the Hilton to provide the best food services for our students that is affordable and offers more options.
There's already been initiatives made to improve that. Can you speak to those? What's already happened?
For food services?
Yeah.
So I know that there were many different ways that we had this. I think before I was here, there was sort of an a la carte option where students can go up and order a meal and they can have that. Then they were weighing options. We have more grab and go options. But I am very aware of the need for our students to have options after 6 p.m. I know we have athletes that sometimes don't get back until 9 o'clock from practices, and I need to make sure that our students are fed, because if you are hungry, then you're not learning, then you're having a hard time concentrating, and if your physiological clock is telling you, I'm hungry, you can't really think about anything else. So we're trying to work on some options for students.
What are some other things in addition to that maybe you can discuss of some maybe on the academic side that you've been working on, some of the more current initiatives that you have?
So in terms of academics, I'm always trying to think of how can we fix our current programming to be the most beneficial for students. Everyone talks about growth all the time, and that's wonderful, but we also have to look at existing programming and if it's the most beneficial program we can have. Now, I will speak to the communication because that's a passion of mine, because I was like all of you. I took communication courses and I studied media, and I talk to our comm kids a lot and say, what specifically are you looking to do when you have your degree? And a lot of them want to go into media. So I think these are the types of things we need to be looking at, things like a media lab, trying to think about how we can have a Mac lab and have a podcast studio and have your own green screen so that you guys can start making making videos, some editing software, and we can start small. We don't have to, we're not going to be a full-blown studio right away or have a full television studio, but these are plans we can start talking about now so that we can implement them in the near future.
If you need any ideas, I've got
I bet all of you do.
Interestingly enough, Mike, I want to bring you into this conversation because currently Mike is in my Projects in Corporate Communication class, and one of the projects that he and a partner is working on are we went around the room, and these are a lot of our upper-level comm students who are probably going to be graduating within the next couple of terms. And we identified one potential area for opportunity.
Okay.
Mike, would you like to talk a little bit more about what the main, crux of your project is going to be and sort of how that developed when Dr. Whaler came into our class?
Sure. So after Dr. Whaler came into our class, we had a probably 50 to 60-minute discussion on things that we liked and disliked about the corporate communications major, what it could offer and what it did not offer. And we came to the conclusion that what would be great for my project with myself and my partner is that we figure out how to set up an alumni luncheon that would incorporate the idea of setting up job shadows so that students in the major could maybe during the term or maybe during the break could be able to shadow a job. So we were thinking of grabbing, for the project, we're thinking of grabbing 5 to 10 people, setting up bios, communicating with them, and connecting them to students so they can be like, okay, you want to do this job, this person in Mechanicsburg does this job.
Yeah.
Head over here during this month of your term, and you can work with them and then report back for an assignment. Or during the break, you can connect with this person that's in Carlos or Pike, wherever. Right. And we thought that would be a great idea.
It's a great idea.
The best thing in the field is practical experience.
Absolutely.
Because theory is great until you get there, then you're really like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And no one wants to be in that situation, so I think it's the best idea.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I'm a huge fan of project-based learning, which is a relatively new idea, but the idea is you would study at home on your own. You'd read the Blackboard discussion posts and any articles your professor posted. You would read the chapters in your book, and then you get to class and you work. You work on projects, you work on editing, you work with the community, and you're right, that's how you learn. And in this industry, especially media, you will never learn how to do this stuff until you're physically doing it. I mean, that's just the truth.
And that was one of the things that we got out of this. It was basically Dr. Whaler had no idea what she was walking into because she knew that she wanted them to work with the communications department. So we had this brainstorm session and realized that so many students don't even realize that job shadows are even an option.
Yeah.
And so what we want to try to do, and what Mike is planning on doing with Kathleen Tarr, his partner, is develop basically a handout that says, here are certain people who have already are willing to do this, and if you are interested in doing a job shadow, they already have all of the information right there instead of having to try to go out and find their own. We already have those connections made.
That's awesome.
And so that's something that right there alone is going to be a huge benefit to our program. And we did the communication alumni luncheon last year, and we'd like to do something like that again to sort of start these conversations about putting something together or longer term plans as far as job shadows go, because the students identified that was something that they wish they had better access to.
Great idea. Great idea.
So let's turn the page here. Okay. One of the things that I noted when I was doing a little bit of thought about the show today was that this will be your first opportunity to attend commencement as a co-president.
Yes.
Last year you were in the provost role.
That's right.
How is that going to be any different this year?
Well, it's interesting because last year our president was unable to attend commencement. Her son was receiving his diploma the day after our students were receiving our diploma. So she couldn't attend. And I had to step in to her role at that time as well. So the big difference as provost, my main role at commencement, other than welcoming everybody, is to basically confer the degrees. So I actually get to say, by the power invested in me, sounds very much like a marriage, because it is sort of like it's a huge step, huge commitment. So I get to confer the degrees, and I get to tell you to move your tassel from, I think, the right side to the left side. And everyone applauds, and it's absolutely beautiful and majestical because the venue at the forum is just unbelievable. And it's one of the best events, I think, at any college or university. Last year, I also handed out the diplomas, which is something the president typically does and takes pictures with students. So I don't know how different it'll be this year, other than I might be addressing the audience in the role as an interim president instead.
So other than maybe coming up with a speech, it'll just be
That's right.
old hat.
It'll be just like last year.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
I'm glad
it
you
is.
brought that up. And the forum is absolutely beautiful.
it's gorgeous.
And one of my favorite nights of the year when I get to talk to some people I've worked with and have had in class over the year. To see them finally make it through the process, it's very touching. It really is.
It's a special day.
Now, okay, so here I'm going to put you on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
What is your most proud achievement that you've had in your time here at the school so far?
Oh, my most proud. Actually, it's not as difficult as I would think it would be. There's been a lot of initiatives. I guess I'm really proud of two things. So the first thing I'm extremely proud of is that I have been able to develop my team, my personal team, and I have such an excellent working relationship with these people that I trust them, they trust me, and we work really well together. And team building, and you guys, this is a lesson, it takes some time. It takes a good year to really understand how things work and how people work, because we're all very different. And I like the fact that my deans are completely different than me, because it makes us balance each other. Probably my most proud accomplishment is that in 1 year time, our retention numbers in students, so retention is how many students stay year to year instead of being academically dismissed or withdrawn or they stop attending class. And in 1 year, we have improved our retention rate by 10%.
Yeah, you just put that out. You sent an email to faculty,
Yeah.
and I mean, honestly, that is something that really means a lot to us.
Huge.
Because it's difficult to get momentum when people are coming and going. I mean, you guys know just from being a part of the club, we've actually been able to retain a lot more of our club members recently and seen them on to graduations. And that's really says something about the health of an institution.
Right. And that's what we're here for. I mean, that's great to get students to come here, but we want you to stay here and we want you to graduate from here. And so the fact that we were able in a short period of time by creating a lot more resources for students, we have resources like the academic dashboard where you can, the dashboard's more of an internal document, but for you, the academic roadmaps where you can see your program hashed out for you, resources for how to, register for class, resources for faculty on advising. So all those little things start to add up. And we also took a look at some of our policies and processes and said, why are we doing things this way? It doesn't really make sense anymore. We're making it harder for students. Let's remove some barriers and make things easier. So we made a lot of progress in one very hectic year.
One last question in our first segment of the program, and of course we're going to come back with Brian and Mike to ask you some student questions that we had. One of the things I talk about all the time is the importance of having, maybe the word mentor is too strong.
I don't think so.
Role model, or at least somebody to look up to. And I know, and I hope, and I strive to be for these gentlemen in some small way. When you look back at your career, and obviously you've worked very hard to be where you are, and you're making the most out of the opportunity that you have here, who is one person that you can look back to as having a major influence on maybe getting into academia in general, or maybe just how passionate you are about your industry?
For me, hands down, his name was Dr. Bill Richards, and he actually passed away just over a year ago. He was the president at SUNY Orange for over 10 years, but when I started, he was the president there, and I was a faculty member, so I was a professor in communication, instructor, actually. You start as instructor, and when I very first started making my way through the classroom, much like you, here's your syllabus, good luck, and I started running the Honor Society, and this man saw something in me. He saw me give a presentation one day and called me to his office and he said, "All right, what do you really want to do?" He goes, "You're going to make a difference. You have much more potential than I think you realize." And I was startled by that. And he was the one who pushed me to get my doctorate degree. He was the one who really formally mentored me, said, I noticed something in you and I want to help you get there, and literally laid out a plan. You're going to be a program chair one day. You're going to be an academic dean one day. You're going to be a vice president of academic affairs, and you're going to be a president. And I remember him saying that to me, and I think I was like 28 or 29. And I thought, that's crazy. Like, this guy's crazy. And sure enough, we met every couple of months, and I would update him on my progress. If he had a special project that he was working on at the college, he'd ask me to sit on the committee. And that's how I learned a lot about higher education. He mentored me through the dissertation process. When I saw this position come open, and I said, I don't know, I feel like I'm called to this place, Dr. Richards. He looked at it, he said, I think you're ready. You need to go for it. And the craziest story is the day that I was moving down here, my kids were with my parents. They were driving down one car. My husband was in the truck in front of me. I was in the car with my basset hound and, full of stuff. And we drove past the Middletown exit, which is where I'm from, Middletown, New York. And I started crying. And I hadn't spoken to Dr. Richards in a while because he had retired. And I just started crying. And I thought, holy cow, how am I going to do this? I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. Like, this is crazy. And my phone rang. And it was Dr. Richards. And I picked up and he said, hey, are you in PA yet? And I said, no, I'm on my way now. And I'm scared. I don't know if I can do it. And he said to me, he started laughing. He goes, what are you scared of? He said, when are you going to stop doubting yourself and understand that you have the ability to do this? And I said, what about my kids? He goes, your kids are going to be fine. You and your husband are going to have a hard time making friends, but your kids will make friends. And I thought, okay, I need to put this in perspective. And totally changed my life, this man. And I credit him with that for sure. And also find mentors along the way. That's one thing I will say to you guys, because I had another mentor who was a very powerful woman, VPAA, and she was wonderful too. And it doesn't always have to be formal. Sometimes a professor takes an interest in you or gives you some motivation, or if you want to ask questions. I think having a mentor is one of the most positive things you could ever do.
And that's one of the things I try to tell. And again, I will happily do anything I can for any of my students, but it should be somebody maybe in their field, but doesn't necessarily have to be. Somebody who just believes in you.
That's it.
And somebody who is there for support. I remember back when I was in college, and I've told this story many times. My first year at school, I fell into the trap a lot of freshmen do. I had a relatively easy go of high school. I was away from home, and my grades didn't go so well. But one of my professors in my second term, named Dr. Laux, Dr. James Laux, who I still talk to this day, saw something in me, and the same thing, similar type of situation as you. And I trust me, I send him an email every couple of months thanking him. And again, we still talk now. He lives far away, so I don't get to see him as much as I'd like.
Right.
But that's what sometimes you need to build up that confidence in yourself and to realize that, hey, I'm good enough to do this.
That's right.
So, well, thank you very much for sharing that story,
Sure.
Dr. Fedrizzi. All right, for the first segment, we're going to wrap up the first segment, but we are going to be right back with Dr. Fedrizzi and, of course, Michael Ademola, Brian Christiana, to give you some questions from the student's perspective.
Excellent. Thanks.
So we'll be right back with the Nightly News Podcast.
This is Megan Ream, Director of the Learning Center at Central Penn College. You can contact us at learningcenter@centralpenn.edu or find us on Facebook and Twitter as the Learning Center at Central Penn College. We are located in ATEC 302. We offer tutoring in math, writing, accounting, and IT, open during daytime hours and available during evenings and on Mondays as needed. We have online resources available through the Blackboard's Learning Center tab, and online tutoring available for those who can't make it into campus. Hope to see you at the Learning Center.
Welcome back to the Nightly News Podcast here for episode number 50. So I can't tell everybody how happy I am that we are here today doing episode 50. Just as sort of a preface, it took us a very long time, needless to say, to get this studio and to really even start this podcast. And the one thing I do want to say is I know that we've talked about this a lot on the show, but I do want to give a special remembrance to Nasir Harris, who was one of the founding members of the club and was on the very first podcast with me and on several of the first few. So I did want to take this time to point out that we really miss you, Nasir, and we wish you could see all the wonderful things we've done with the podcast studio here at the school. So thank you very much for being a part of it. All right, Dr. Fedrizzi, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule. I I can't thank you enough for being here and doing this. So what I want to do in this segment of the show is I'd like to turn it over to our Nightly News president, Brian Christiana, and Michael Ademola, one of our Nightly News reporters, who's actually also the photographer for the basketball team, which is a wonderful thing. And he's been able to make a couple bucks doing that too on the side, so that's wonderful, and developing your resume, so that's fantastic. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to them. Brian, why don't you tell us sort of where we came up with these questions and set the stage for the listeners?
Okay, so last Thursday, the media club had our bi-weekly meeting, and Professor Miller said, come up with some good questions that we can ask Ms. Fedrizzi, and many media club members came up with some good questions, and this is from them directly.
Okay,
so
that's
yeah,
excellent.
Yeah, are we ready to go?
Have at it.
All right. What is your personal professional opinion on social media today in regard to the job search?
So that's interesting. So it's become much easier to find jobs in terms of like searches to look for jobs because of the amount of social media, but it also exposes people a lot more than it ever did before. So there's like pluses and minuses. The pluses are you finally are able to make connections with people you never ordinarily would have been able to connect with, right? Like I've had a few communication students reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like that's a smart thing to do because then you find me and now I'm on your LinkedIn and anyone who's looking at yours can see that you know the president of the college and that's a positive. I think that it's great for the person who's pursuing jobs because you can also learn a lot about the companies, the places that are hiring. You could do some background checks. You can look and see what people are saying about them. You can see the type of people that are working there, and you can even connect with some of the employees. The only thing is, of course, with social media, I'm sure Professor Miller has talked to you about this. Anyone can see anything that you do, any picture that you posted. It's never really deleted. Anything that you say, and I will say, sometimes I look at comments that people post and I think, why are you doing that? I get it. You're passionate about certain things, and so you want to take a stance and you want to really say what's on your mind. And I'm all for freedom of speech, especially being a communication major. But sometimes it can get you in trouble, especially if you're firing off and you're angry or you got to be really careful.
One of the things, and I'm going to turn it back to you here in just a second, Mike. One of the things that when I teach social media, I always hear this freedom of speech idea, and that it's not fair for an employer to not hire me because of something I said on social media.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the point that I make is that, for one, we are in an at-will state.
Yeah.
And as long as people are not using discriminatory hiring practices,
right, of course,
it is legal for them to hire whoever they want to and fire whoever they want to at any time. So it's not, to me, a freedom of speech issue. Now, it's not the government saying, hey, Linda, you can't say something.
That's right.
That's not what's going on. It's sort of the employers policing themselves and understanding that anybody who works for any company is part of that brand now in the social media age. If I go on LinkedIn and say that I am a professor here at Central Penn College, when I put something on LinkedIn, it says that right there.
That's
so
right.
If I come out and say something crazy that is inappropriate, there could be recourse taken against me.
Exactly.
Of course. And I'll say one other thing with social media, that's not freedom of speech. And I hear that sometimes there's a difference between freedom of speech and being unkind. And people have just become unkind. Yeah. And that, to me, is a red flag. So you can say whatever's on your mind, but if you come across and you're a person who's just not nice, that's going to hurt you in the job search.
All right, Mike, next question.
How did the communications field lead to your job today?
That's an excellent question. So you guys know when I started at the community college, Associate of Arts in Communication, took a bunch of comm classes, Bachelor of Communication. So Bachelor of Arts in Communication, I studied TV, radio, and film, learned how to edit. Then my master's degree was in organizational communication, so much more about communication and how organizations work with each other. My doctorate was in higher education, so you would think that prepared me the most for this role. I think it was my communication skills that I lean on the most in this job as provost and president, because I think what separates comm people from everyone else is we know how to build relationships. And you can be the smartest person in the room and know your field inside and out. You could be the best businessman or woman. But if you have a hard time relating to other people and communicating, and more importantly than that, being a good listener, you will not make it very far. So I think communication, and what I've learned most about interpersonal communication and dealing and working with other people, has prepared me for both of these roles the most.
Excellent. All right, Brian, next question.
How has communications changed since you started studying it?
Well, if you want to talk about digital, I mean, I used to splice tape together. So we're going back to the time where you cut the tape and you actually would literally tape it with a piece of tape together to
like
make
a VCR
film.
Almost.
It was before that.
Oh.
It was reel to reel. So no, I mean, we had VCRs. That's what I grew up with. And so when I learned editing, it was linear editing, and it was 2 VHS tapes, and you took the left tape and you put it in one machine and then the right tape, and you'd have to cut and splice that way. But for audio, it was still reel to reel when I was in my first newsroom. So you had these huge reels, and you'd literally have to rewind it and find the right spot. So, I mean, technology-wise, the communication field has just skyrocketed. Also, when I was on radio, they just started having video at the same time. So like now you can watch any radio show on YouTube, right? You can watch any program because they video record it. The time that I was on radio, my co-host used to come in sweatpants or PJs some days and didn't do his hair, would wear a hat, and nobody saw us. We were sort of, I mean, we were faceless. We were voices that they heard. And I remember we had a show one time where like, what do you think we look like? Because that's how it was. And, you know, we'd hear how they would describe our physical appearance. Then that started changing because that was in 2000. Then it started changing. There was more video, there was streaming, there was photos, there was websites. So people knew who we were and there were appearances. But now there's so much more video with everything. And just YouTube. Like I have 2 kids, they don't even watch TV. They watch YouTube. They're not even interested in television. So just the platforms have changed so drastically.
Do you think at this point there are too many people doing this that have no clue what they're doing?
There are people doing it. Are they good at it? Not necessarily. I think that it's still worth it to get trained in how to speak on a microphone, how to talk, how to have conversations. But I mean, I think it's great that people want to. I think it's great that this generation grew up with tablets in their hands. They know how to edit before they even come to school. Like it's pretty remarkable.
But at the same time, isn't it sort of in a way devaluing the knowledge that we have, that anybody out there can go be a journalist even without any kind of training, or can be a podcaster or a videographer without any kind of training?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it devalues it, but the thing that's different is we have the theory behind it. I mean, we understand what makes a video good. We understand what you put in the beginning, the types of camera angles that you take. We know how to tell a story. And those are the things that some of those people are lacking. I think it's great. I think we talked about this last time too, like the whole video journalism movement where video's on your cell phone now. People are documenting news stories on their cell phone. The part about it that I like is it's providing access to people who never would see those news stories anywhere else. So everyone's more on their toes because you never know when there's a camera rolling.
Well, and we talk a lot in class about the non-professional journalist and how that's really changed the face of journalism as a whole. And it's it's kind of sad that there isn't more opportunity out there for trained quality writers and journalists in 2017. And there's not really a whole lot of students that are really pursuing that at this point, because it's just part of being a radio broadcaster. It's part of being an anchor. Like writing now is part of every communication job, and that's what I was actually just talking about that in class today.
Yeah.
That if you come out of communications, you need to write. I don't care what you're going to do. So, next question, Mike.
What excited you about the communication industry when you entered college?
Oh, well, for me, I loved sports. And particularly football. I'm a really big football fan. And I loved entertainment. And the thing that was exciting to me was being on camera and speaking to athletes and interviewing celebrities. And I was really intrigued by that. I started out in news, but it was too depressing for me. It was also very cutthroat. I didn't like the atmosphere of the newsroom. I didn't like that people were plowing over people to get a news story. And I thought, that's not for me. I just want to know. I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to be in entertainment in general. And I thought communication was something that felt very natural to me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed having conversations with people, and it was fun. I will say I thought of one other thing with the last conversation and the difference between like our students and journalists that have no background. We provide an ethical understanding and responsibility in journalism. And I think that's where the line has gotten blurred. And people are doing and saying, even on the professional channels, when you ask me about what's changing, I watched a news story the other day, and the news anchor was totally giving her opinion about the whole story and the person involved. And I'll tell you, when I went through it, it was like, you don't give your opinion. Nobody should know your political background. Nobody should know what your personal thoughts are. You are there to be someone who's informing. That has changed drastically. Commentators have no trouble saying what they think anymore, and that's new.
Well, the thing to me is, I mean, I have no problem with political commentary, but it's in the same way as somebody writing a column in a newspaper. A columnist
It's an opinion.
is offering their opinion, but as a columnist, it's implied.
Right.
I'm a columnist, I'm going to provide opinion. When you're writing straight news stories, there should never be opinion in there.
It's hard.
And I think that the ethical and morality issues that are not being taught to some of these quote-unquote journalists is really where the whole industry as a whole is lacking big time. And I'm hoping that maybe there's somewhat of a renaissance of communication ethics that comes with our communication students.
Yeah, there has to be.
All right, Brian, next question.
Okay. What advice do you give about a student looking for a job in the field?
Okay, so communication field, right? I would say a couple of things. One, your idea about finding a person and shadowing a person is a great idea because you want to make sure it's something you actually want to do. And I would say if you have the opportunity, so one of the things that I feel like got me ahead and got me a job in radio right out of college at 21 years old was that when I was on my internship, I was given opportunities to edit video. I was given opportunities to voiceover work. And a lot of times they had events on Saturdays and Sundays and Friday nights. And my college friends would go home and be like, yeah, no, it's Friday night. I'm going home. And I'd be like, I'll do Friday, I'll do Saturday, I'll do Sunday. And I put in the extra time. There's so many events at the college. There's so many things happening at the college. Volunteer to do those things because every single thing you do here can go on your resume. So that's one thing. The other thing about communication, you asked me what got me, the best in this job, like what was helping me the most. Even if you don't work in radio or television or film, your job and the skills you're learning can apply to any field. So right now, especially, every business wants someone who understands social media and editing and video and voiceover work and audio because a lot of people right now don't know how to do those things. So you have an advantage, and you also are studying interpersonal skills, which gives you an advantage. So I would say don't limit yourself to communication only.
One of the things that we talk about in the meetings, too, is basically when we go into our nightly news meetings, Brian takes the lead, now new president, puts all of the stories that we have potentially to work on, and we sort of dole them out based on different people's interests.
Right.
And, obviously we have several writers who are going above and beyond and doing all kinds of different stories. And then we have some other people who are a little bit more shy about their writing. So that's why we always just try to give as much opportunity out there as we can. Interestingly enough, one of the new initiatives that we're working on, obviously, is broadcast of the baseball games that we're looking to do, and these two gentlemen are interested in helping out.
Great.
Brian's actually doing a project right now while we are figuring out how some of the logistical challenges that we have, but he's also putting together a media kit for the team, so that's going to be something that he can share with the commentators as well. So these two gentlemen sitting here are definitely taking advantage of every opportunity.
That's perfect. That's what I like to hear.
One last question, Mike.
From a student perspective, how can we acquire more attendance in sports and sporting events?
Then that's tough, right? That's such a challenge. And it's a challenge when you have a lot of students who are commuter students or a lot of online students. In terms of encouraging participation, the things you guys are doing and the fact that you're going to start broadcasting games is huge, because that generates excitement for those games. So if you start showing people how much fun they are, how much is happening there, you get a couple of new people to go every time, you get the faculty to come out to the games. That's one way to really start generating some of that excitement. The fact that you're a photographer and you're putting, photos up on our website, that's another thing. And we have to have everyone understand that even if you're a commuter student, you can still come and be a knight. And you are a knight. You should be celebrating our sports teams and our theater productions as well. It goes in both directions.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for representing the club and coming up with some of those questions on your own. They were wonderful questions, and thank you for taking the time out.
You're welcome.
In the final minute here, I would be remiss if I didn't at least ask where we are on the presidential search. So would you mind just anything you feel comfortable discussing? Yeah. Where are we currently?
So we had a close date of January 19th, although CVs or resumes can still come in. We are in the process where we have a search committee, and on that search committee, they're reviewing resumes, and they're going to start first round interviews. And in higher ed, everything is always, it's a big process, right? So there's a first round interview where there's a phone call, second round interview, so they'll narrow it down from that. They'll bring in maybe 12 to 15 people, and they'll do Skype interviews if they're far away, or they'll come in, and that'll be the second round. And then hopefully sometime in late March, early April, presidential candidates will come to campus. And I can tell you that what I've heard is that students will absolutely be invited to come and see the presidential candidates give a presentation, as will faculty and staff. And then they're hoping to announce a new president by May 1st and have the new president start by June 1st.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful timeline. So at least I think for all those people out there, not only students, faculty, staff, and alumni, it's wonderful that we are in great hands until that time. So, Dr. Fedrizzi, in all honesty, thank you so much I know you're so busy.
I love this, though, Professor Miller. This is like one of my most favorite things to do. So anytime, I mean that. And
I hope it's not another year until we have you down again.
Sounds good.
Maybe over the summer, maybe we can have you back when you're a little bit more at liberty to talk about the presidential search.
Love it. I would love to do that.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today.
No problem.
It meant a lot to me for you guys to be down here and be a part of our 50th episode. So.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. All right, so for Nightly News President Brian Christiana, for Nightly News reporter and photographer of the Nightly News basketball team, Michael Ademola, and of course our co-president, interim co-president and provost, Dr. Linda Fedrizzi-Williams. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll catch you next time on the Nightly News Podcast.